Pod. Pod.
Like, so I think what's really interesting, like the beginning of my story, is that it's like most of the people you've spoken to, and I've really, really enjoyed the podcast. Like, I really enjoyed Preston's one, and obviously hearing Tom at the beginning. It's like, and like with Tom, I mean, like with the Paddingtons, they just were a group of mates who were in a band, and that was basically their dream, was to be in a band. And you know, like the dream started in a rehearsal studio. And for me, the dream didn't start anywhere near there. Like the dream started for me on the internet, being on forums. And there were two forums. There was Libertines.org and there was the Others forum. And I had a friend called Jess who took me to go and see this band, the Others. I'd never heard of them before. I didn't really read the NME as a kid. So she took me to see them, and we saw them in Brighton, and we hung out with Dom afterwards, and it was like, oh, fucking hell, do you know what I mean? Like, we just hung out with the lead singer, like, you know, and he gives everyone his number, and, you know, Dominic's podcast was hilarious. And it really made me laugh, especially that story at the end, Ian Brown story. But, you know, it's like that was great. And then obviously there was the Libertines.org. And then if you were really, what was quite funny was you had Libs.org and you had the Others. And then if you were really into music, you'd go on Drowned in Sound or Block Party. The Block Party forum had quite a lot of A&Rs. I think one of the A&Rs for XL used to post on the Block Party forum. It was like quite an interesting bunch of people. And they were kind of a little bit kind of the noses up about Libertines, and they kind of thought the Libertines were kind of, you know, a bit shit, and, you know, they were a bit more Angler in their musical tastes. But the way that I kind of got into all this fucking madness was there was a band called the Redcoats, who I'm happy to go on record with saying were kind of like a kind of really weak version of the Libertines. But it was the first one I ever hung out with a charismatic lead singer of a band, and James, who was in the band, was very much that. And, you know, and basically it was a very, very small group of people on their forum. Me being really internet savvy and being really into, you know, I used to design websites as a kid for fun, and I used to run a fancy wrestling website. So, you know, I knew my way around the internet. And, it was just like kind of my first taste of like kind of being accepted into a peer group, really, in terms of I just started this college, and we were all kind of a bunch. I'd just been thrown out of college in the first year, where I was kind of listening to NERD and listening to R. Kelly, and, you know, basically I didn't really have a very good music taste. And then I started this new college, and everybody was into really avant-garde shit. I had a mate called Barney, whose dad ran a record shop in Worthing, and he got me into the Fall and to, like, you know, I had these two stoners that were like a couple of years older than us, and they had their own flat. We were allowed to go there and smoke spliffs with them and basically listen to the Velvet Underground and Bill Hicks on CD or tape. And they didn't have a telly, and it was like blew my mind that they didn't have a telly. And I wanted to be a scriptwriter. I wanted to basically write sitcoms and be a funny man and do all that stuff. And this guy, basically, Josh, who managed the Redcoats, he met a guy called Andrew Avelin, who was the lead singer of Littl'ans. So Andrew basically, Andrew had done a gig with James, and obviously we'd heard these rumours that he knew Pete, and obviously there was, you know, like, again, you know, I'm 17 at this point, so like any kind of connection to, like, you know, one of your favourite rock stars was just, you know, it was like blew my mind. And things just kept unraveling like a kind of like an onion, really, where like kind of each outer layer I just kind of get closer and closer to kind of all the things that I'd basically spent an entire summer reading about on Libertines.org, you know, about these guerrilla gigs, about these flat gigs, you know, about all the craziness that kind of happened between the Libertines' first and second album. And obviously the second album came out, and that was, I think, the summer of 2005. Did that come out?
Yeah, sounds about right, yeah.
Yeah, and that was, you know, and then that summer I started to come up to London. So I went to the Love Hate Music Racism gig at Trafalgar Square. It must have been May, June 2005. I went with my mate Nick, and Nick, like, he didn't understand why I was into this music. Like, Roll Deep were performing, so he was like, right, yeah, brilliant, I'll go see them. And Nick was like, he was this like amazing, like his heritage is Jamaican Irish. He had this big afro and then this like big Irish nose, and he was just like, every girl that spoke to him, he just was like putting his hand. So he was just up there, just basically I think we had like 10 quid between us, right? We stayed in London for 2 days, And basically this girl, Maeve, she basically threw a banana at me or something. And came up to me. I was wearing a Beatles t-shirt, and she was like, "Oh, what's your favourite Beatles song?" And or maybe what's that Alan Partridge quote? What's the favourite Beatles album? Like,
yeah, it's got to be the best of the Beatles.
Yeah, anyway, and so that night, I mean, she was 15, right? I think at the time, and I must have been, maybe I was 17, and I remember she basically. The thing about London girls as well is like what's interesting is like they definitely grow up quicker, but like you're streetwise, like from such a young age, like the indie scene, and not me trying to kind of create some kind of like controversy, but there was a lot of young people in that scene, people who were 13 and 14 who were either lying about their age. I remember Maeve lied to me and said that she was, I think she even said she was 18. I think she said she was older than me. Like these people, they want these kids, they wanted to be part of the scene, and they, like the whole, I mean, what Dominic was saying was like the whole point is that you had these open places where young people were kind of safe in the sense that they could go to gigs and then they could, make sure everyone made sure they got home, or they had places to crash, or there was obviously like a lot of streetwise kids in London who were kind of disenfranchised and kind of wanted there was a particular girl called Charlotte whose house in Islington that we recorded this Channel 4. I mean, I don't know, I'll put it on my Instagram when this goes live so people can see it again. Basically, Channel 4 paid me and a girl called Shola, who's now a producer of Lauren Laverne's show on at Six Music, we basically got paid 50 quid to talk about indie. And it's like the most cringe-worthy thing that you can ever see. It's unreal. I've been, because I've been coming up, obviously, so basically that night that I met Maeve and her mates. She took us to the Great Eastern Hotel, which is now in Liverpool Street. It's renamed or whatever. It was like this amazingly, like for me, the poshest hotel I've ever been in, right? And they had the Cazals performing, the Paddingtons performing. It was the first time I saw Paddingtons live. It was for PlayStation, for the new portable PlayStation that they just released, like the kind of handheld game they had. And it was all free. It was free booze. And it was just like, fuck me. What, like, do you know what I mean? It was like literally this taste. It was like, wow, I want this. Like, I want to hang out with all this. And we all went back to Maeve's, and it was like, 6 of us all in Maeve's room, and Maeve's mum making us toast in the morning. And it was like, so I kind of turned my back on my college mates. It kind of got me into this kind of music, and I just became like a London scenester basically, and started coming up. And what would happen is you'd come up on, say, like Thursday, and you'd stay till Monday, and all you would do is you'd literally just blag your way into, I mean, I used to do the big thing like, oh, I'm from Brighton, and it's cost me £20 to get up, please can I be on the cheap list, you know what I mean, like just trying to big steal and borrow your way through into any gig. And then you would basically like I was 17, I didn't have a job, and like my mum might give me 10 or 20 quid to go up, but that was all you had. It wasn't like you even had like online banking where you can these days you might be able to go, oh, you lend us a tenner. Do you know what I mean? It was like literally you had that money and you had to make it last. And I don't know how the fuck we did it, but we did it. And you'd go out Thursday at the time of your life, you'd wake up, bounce back up on Friday, bum around, sit in parks. Basically just, it wasn't even like we were doing anything in the daytime. Then as soon as you got to the evenings, it was basically sat in parks drinking until you got to the gig. You saw the gig, then you worked out where the after party was, and then the after party, and you just kind of, before you know it, you're doing that every weekend. And then eventually I just kind of packed a bag, and it was like kind of, is it Dick Whittington? No, Dick, who's the one that's got the fucking...
with the cat,
yeah, no, do you know what? No. I'm going to slow down, because basically, the red handkerchief on the stick. Who's that? What's that? You got a kid? You know that little story.
I mean, right. Whittington made sense to me. I don't know.
We'll edit this bit out. I mean, one of the big influences to begin with going to London was Les Incompetents.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
I mean, like Fred McPherson was always, for me, like was one of the first people I kind of watched on stage and went, I would love to do what he's doing. It was the element of the way they blended comedy and he could sing. And I thought the stories that he told were really, really vivid and imaginative, and and they were really catchy tunes, like they were that lovely jingly jangly indie pop that we all grew to love. And the gigs were raucous, they would just play these small venues, like I remember seeing them at the Purple Turtle in Camden. And I remember going home and raiding my mum's wardrobe to try and steal a trench coat that she had that was similar to Fred's. And I went and bought a pair of winkle pickers from Office. And yeah, I just thought Lessing were like the band that I remember watching first and going, wow. And then I remember seeing Selfish Cunt in Brighton. And that was like, okay, and I want to be like him too. But I couldn't really be like him because I was too nice. Do you know what I mean? I was 17 and it was like I was wide-eyed and I didn't really have any aggression. I didn't have anything to fight out about because at the time things were just exciting and fun. And I think Lessing encapsulated that for me quite a lot in the early days. And obviously Fred's gone off to have big success with Spectre. And that was basically the first chapter of how things kicked off.
What was your introduction to the Littl'ans and to like working with Babyshambles and stuff?
So with this kind of that connection of the Redcoats, the band I mentioned very early on.
Yeah.
Josh, who was managing the Redcoats, they kind of fizzled out, and Josh was asked by Andrew if he would manage him, and he said he's going to get a band together, call them Littl'ans. Andrew had been in a band called anecdotes, which is a very kind of weird story. But when I was at college, I did like a media course, and we were making a film, and I made this like avant-garde weird film. And you were basically meant to say you meant to only allowed to use music that had been cleared, right? You weren't allowed to use any copyright stuff. And I basically told them a bit of a fib and said that I had got permission for anecdotes. I had no idea who they were, but they just seemed obscure enough that they wouldn't question it. And it turns out that was Andrew's band, which was just some weird kind of serendipity. But I met Andrew with Josh, and he played a kind of solo gig, and he just had Andrew won't mind me saying this, but he just had no stage presence. He was very kind of, it was almost kind of part of the performance was the fact that he looked so uncomfortable on stage. And he just really, I still think he's such a beautiful songwriter and his melodies, and he spent a lot of time with Jarvis Cocker. He used to live with Jarvis, and he's a bit like Forrest Gump in the way that I am, in the sense that we just seem to be in the right places at the right times for certain events in our lives. And obviously, he lived through that kind of electro clash or whatever you'd kind of call, and then to Goldfrapp kind of era. And then you've got, the Pete Doherty era, and then obviously Jarvis Cocker. It's like, he used to live with Pete. It's like, some amazing people that he's lived with in terms of musicians. But just really, really hated being on stage. And he wanted someone basically to take the shine off him, I think. And he met me, and he saw that I had a bit of a kind of Pied Piper quality in those early days, where I suppose, from a kind of natural confidence and just everything being new, every single experience, every single thing that happened that summer was new to me. And I got down to Duke of Clarence, which was this incredible, derelict kind of illegal pub run by a really good friend of mine now called Ty Ogidan, who is like the craziest fucking African you'll ever meet in your life, right? Had diplomatic immunity, so he could do whatever the fuck he wanted without really having any kind of one to answer to. And he basically bought this pub off a bunch of gangsters called the Addams Family, and they were not creepy and they were not kooky. They were hard nuts, mate. And they again, there's some horrible kind of stories that maybe Ty doesn't want me to share, but it was a nasty place. And now, at 33, there's no fucking way I would have gone into that pub. But at 17, you just go, because everyone else is going in there. And obviously the reason that we all went there is because they served us because we were underage. And Andrew was there, and he was like, well, look, I'm supporting Pete and Kate Moss tonight. And I was like, all right. And he said, well, why don't you get up? Because by this point, I'd listened to all the songs religiously. I knew all the lyrics. He said, why don't you get up on stage? Why don't you get up on stage and sing the songs with me tonight? And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, come on, come up and get on stage. And literally the microphone was 2 microphones gaffer taped together, right? The pub was rammed, right? Because obviously everyone's there for Pete, and obviously I think Bobby Gillespie was there. Like, it was a crazy crowds. Obviously Kate was there, Moss and all this stuff. And I got on stage and, just kind of sung out a tune, basically, with Andrew, and it was a complete ramshackle. It was, probably worse than any GCSE drama exam you probably could ever YouTube. And the rest of the band seemed a bit peeved that I was suddenly, just stepped on stage and kind of everything they'd rehearsed was totally thrown out the window. But there was something about Andrew that he seemed to like about me, and I obviously thought he was brilliant. So I was basically downstairs afterwards, and I remember looking up, being in the basement, and there was just police officers walking down the stairs towards me. And I was thinking, okay. And they're like, right, this place has been raided. Get out, get out, get out. And I'm like, what? Right? And the pub had been raided by the police, right? Because obviously they'd heard about the illegal, obviously the fact it was a legal pub, unlicensed, and obviously it was a huge, big thing about online, about Pete playing. So Pete never even played in the end. So I didn't see Kate Moss. And I remember we all spilled out onto the street, and Pete and Andrew started playing Their Way, which was basically the song that Andrew and Pete wrote together. And it was kind of given to Andrew because he nicked the members of Andrew's other band, The White Sport. He nicked Pat, obviously, who was on your show, and Adam. He nicked them from The White Sport. So, and there's all many rumours about was it given as a present or was it blah, blah, blah. I don't actually really know the truth about that, but that song had been recorded and that was ready to be released in a few months. And they sung it for the first time together on the street. And there's a video that my friend Guy directed of basically me singing it along with Pete, because obviously I'm one of the only people that had heard it before. And that, by inadvertently, basically kind of allowed me to be in our first music video. And a few days later, I got a phone call from Andrew and he said, look, do you want to come up to Sheffield with us? We're going to support Babyshambles out on the tour. And again, it was like, yeah, I'd love to. Do you know what I mean? But I didn't think I was going to be on stage. I just thought, I'm coming to hang out, I'm just one of the gang. And I got to Andrew's flat and, we jumped in the splitter van. I'd never been in a splitter van before. I'd never been in a fucking van that had a PlayStation before. And hung out with Andrew and basically, we went up to Sheffield and there's a little bit of controversy, basically. Andrew's one good friend of his, James Millord, is Pete's old manager. And he was obviously involved in a lot in he was accused of selling the story of Kate Moss to the News of the World and all this kind of stuff. And so obviously Andrew and James, his friendship, and obviously Pete was very frosty the first time that I met him in Sheffield, very, very frosty, and was not happy with Andrew. And Andrew and I just basically spent most of the time in Sheffield trying to be as far away from him and the band as possible, really. And he wasn't having a good time. And, I was just witnessing it, through these like rose tinted glasses, just going, wow, pinching myself every single time, that Adam said hi, or, I saw Pat or spoke to Mick, who was the tour, the tour OD and all this kind of stuff. And then basically there was a tambourine backstage and I was just playing it, just rapping it, right? And I've got no musical background at all, right? My dad tried to teach me guitar his whole life and I was never interested. Like, I can touch type 180 words a minute, but I cannot play a single note on a guitar. Like, computers was my thing, the internet was my thing. And Andrew said, why don't you come on stage tonight and play the tambourine with me? And I was like, what? It's like, yeah. And you could see the rest of the band were not happy. They did, it was, again, they were like, what do you mean? No, this is a gimmick. This isn't cool. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, this is Bez, right? But something that Andrews had saw in himself that just thought, okay, I need someone to take the pressure off me, or or I suppose I was like a master of ceremonies, really, in the sense that I came on stage and Ben, our drummer, introduced us, which I didn't hear. I didn't hear him introduce me as Ronnie. But I got on stage and I just started dancing like a little, a drunken fairy. Like, I was just so whimsical and just what was amazing is we were playing to 5,000 people, but it didn't seem to faze me. I was just happy to be up there. It was like time stood still. I think it's what they say, like when you're in a fast car, it's like time doesn't speed up, like time slows down and you get to see like the full kind of panoramic view. And just looking out and just playing his tambourine to the music, and I remember the bass player Pato screaming at me after the gig, being like, I could not hear a fucking word. I couldn't hear a single word because of your fucking tambourine. Because my fucking tambourine's in her fucking ear the whole time. Right. And I'm thinking it's like looking really cool and she can't hear the fucking music. So she's playing out of time. Right. And we all of a sudden during the gig, I got this chant, Ronnie, Ronnie, Ronnie. And I was like, this is trigger happy TV. Like, do you know what I mean? This is some kind of weird prank. This isn't happy. This isn't real, right? And it's like, and people were chanting my name. And obviously it's because Ben had introduced me. And I got off stage and it was like, wow. Do you know what I mean? Like, it was just like, it was fucking mad. And Josh, the manager, he took me to one side and said, that was good, but you're not doing that again. And I was like, that's cool, man. Do you know what I mean? That was my 5 minutes of fame and that was brilliant. You know, like, I'll take that. I'll take that for me the rest of my life. And then Andrew jumped on and said, what are you on about? No, fuck off, Josh. No. Ronnie, do you want to be in the band? And I was like, yeah, go on then. I mean, what else am I fucking going to do? And I was meant to be going to university that year, that summer in Westminster, and one of my best mates died, and I kind of was a bit distracted from uni, and I just thought, fuck it, I'm not going to uni. I'm going to fucking go on tour Babyshambles. And the next thing I know, we're playing to fucking 4,000 or 5,000 people every night for 2 weeks. And I really wish I'd gone to university.
What year was that? Where was that gig in Sheffield?
That would have been September 2005, I think.
Right.
It was at Sheffield University.
Okay, because I went to a gig at Sheffield. Plug Babyshambles around that time, but
so we did have a gig actually at Plug. I mean, the funny thing is, so after the Babyshambles tour, I mean, you'll probably need to talk about getting arrested, don't I? Because that was like, I mean, obviously, the tour, it was crazy, like playing football in Preston, and suddenly Pete's like, joining in with us, and we're playing footy with Pete, and it was like, all these kind of moments that, you at 18 now, it's like, you're just thinking, fucking hell, man, I can't wait for Christmas Eve and go back home and tell everyone what I've been doing. And you kind of, and just these mad moments. But we've been in Manchester. We played Manchester Academy, and that was one of the biggest gigs on the tour. And, Manchester and Pete have got an amazing, symbiotic relationship, really, really love each other. And the fans in Manchester are just amazing. I mean, I love Manchester City. And they played Manchester Academy. Were you at that gig? Did you go to that one?
No, mate, I'd have been in Hull in college at that point.
Yeah, right. And so Gio Goy, who was like his kind of fashion label, like Anthony's he's a legend, man, and his brother and Chris, like, great guys and still friends of mine to this day. And, they have no shame in the fact that, they are naughty boys, and they've done a few illegal things in their time. And again, just wide-eyed, had no idea who they were, and they just had this party bus. They basically just rented this double-decker bus, and it was a party, and it was crazy. And it was probably the first time that I think I probably got chatting to Drew and Adam and Pat and and all these other Manchester kind of lunatics. I think a lot of non-Gallagher's lot were there, and it was like, it was a fun little party. And we got to Shrewsbury the next day, and we were dead, we were fucking wiped. And our tour manager driver was this old bloke who smoked a bit of spliff just to basically keep his Parkinson's at bay. But we walked through Sheffield, me and Andrew again. And by this point, we were like, me and him were thick as thieves. And again, he had the guitar and I had a tambourine. And we just sat in this alleyway, just playing this song called Alleyways, which was like basically him going alleyways, and me just rattling the tambourine. And we had this, like, it was like being a Pied Piper. There were like this group of kids that just followed us around town as we just sung this, this silly song about alleyways. And I was like, okay, well, I really understand the cult of personality of Pete Doherty now and Babyshambles. Like, this is crazy. This is madness. We did this. We basically got backstage into the dressing room, and Pete and Pat are there, and they're playing Smith songs. And again, it's another pinch myself moment. The Smiths, big influence, obviously, as a teenager, of those kind of 2 years of kind of getting into indie music, and suddenly, Pete, and it was like, just wow, what a moment. And then we got on and did our gig, and we were knackered, like we were done, and then we had the next day off. We weren't going to support them at Norwich, so we headed back. And on tour, I'd been reading this. I've been reading this book about being a highwayman, right, from the 1800s, and they basically just like ram horse and carts off the road and basically stick them up and, rob them and then go off. So I don't know why I was reading this book, right, but whatever, taking my fancy. And all of a sudden, we kind of, we make a bit of a quick dash out of the venue and kind of we're trying to get back onto the motorway to head down the M1. And all of a sudden, fucking police, like basically pull out our splitter van open onto the curb, right? It's like SAS fucking style police. Like, honestly, like they're all in fucking black gear. Get out, put your hands up. Like, I remember one of them like whacking me around the face with a truncheon, but not like a fucking big whack, but definitely connected. I was like, what the hell is going on? Like, literally hands up, literally handcuffed. We were then put into like police vans separately, all separated. It was a proper big bus. There must have been like 12 police vans. Like they wanted to be the town that got Pete. They wanted to be the town that got Doherty and went, right, we fucking got you, mate, right? Instead, they got us a bunch of idiots, right? The police officer saying, can we get your autographs after all this? And they go in, do you know, I'm nobody. What are you on about? Right? And we got taken to Shrewsbury police station. And the night before, obviously, I met Adam and Drew probably for the first time and chatted away. And, I'm like 18-year-old Ronnie, just, green as dollar. And we're all sat in this police like station. They're like, right, we're going to have to strip search you all now, right? And it's like being in a fucking fever dream. Do you know what I mean? It's like you just don't expect any of this to happen. And you almost don't have enough time to actually register the fact that it is happening to you. So you're basically, everyone's been brought in, and there's like this bit of bravado because we're all blokes, right? It's like, hey, she had to use two hands. To, like fucking. Johnny Headlock was there, right? Who was an interesting bloke to know and to be around for all the wrong reasons. I actually accidentally texted Johnny Headlock because I was trying to text another Johnny a few years ago, and he's now a spiritual leader and started texting me back a load of religious stuff saying, whatever you're doing, stop it because God loves you and blah, blah, blah. I was like, fuck me. But anyway, so none of us had any drugs on us. None of us had anything that they could do us for. We also had a lawyer with us as well, randomly, who was one of Pete's mates. I mean, maybe Pete just had a lawyer on with him at all times. I don't know. That basically we were all released without charge, and they'd taken Pete to Norwich Station because obviously they'd eventually caught them all. And then I think he was clean. I think probably got tipped off, to be honest. I think that party had a good connection within the police. I mean, it is funny, isn't it, how the deeper into the underworld you get, the more corruption you seem to uncover in terms of that kind of stuff. No one was arrested. And the irony is the only person who had any drugs on him was our 60-year-old tour driver who had a bit of puff on him, basically. They didn't charge him either. I think they just kind of let him go with caution, and that was it. So, yeah, crazy fucking time.
So how long was that tour, sorry?
About 2 weeks.
Okay.
And obviously I'd go back and do it in a heartbeat. And it's almost like I've got almost like a photographic memory of those moments, like being in Leeds and being dropped off about 3 o'clock in the morning in a random car park, and Steph and Ashley Barker, these girls from Leeds, these sisters, basically picking us up, and it was like, it was like almost like indie kid trafficking, where it was like, right, you take this lot now, and they took us to a house in Headingley, and this guy Ali Tant lived there, basically, I remember waking up in the next morning and having 4 plates of beans on toast because it made so much, and I was like, yeah, I'll bring it on. It was almost like I was a growing lad, and then I remember Sam Riley was there, and he. Who went on to obviously become a very famous actor.
Yeah.
He was hanging out there one morning, and he was just saying to me, like, oh, I've got an audition today. And I was like, oh, right, cool. What's it for? And he was like, oh, it's I'm going to play Ian Curtis in a film. Obviously, that was his big breakout role, wasn't it, that day that he went to?
Yeah.
So, again, just those little kind of moments, again, where, I've never seen Sam Riley since, and I doubt he remembers that moment. But, it was like, wow, okay, that's, just what strange way that I was, I spoke to him that morning that, his life changed forever. And, and it was funny times. I remember, like, I've met this girl in Liverpool at Liverpool Academy, and, my answer was beautiful. And I remember saying, do you want to meet Pete? And by that point, I think we'd been, it must have been just towards the end of the tour. I think maybe the third to last tour. So my confidence within the kind of groups was like obviously a bit higher. And I remember saying, I can introduce you to Pete. And I remember introducing her to Pete, and like he just went, yoink, thank you very much. And she was with him for the rest of the tour, and it was like, fucking hell. So, I mean, I learned that lesson. Yeah, you never ever introduce a pretty girl to a band member who's significantly more of an icon than you are. And then we did, and then we played Cardiff. We played Cardiff, and that was a really rough crowd. I remember it was really, really violent. It was proper. You didn't expect the Welsh to be that rolled up. But I remember it wasn't a nice environment being at that gig. And then it was the first night that I'd managed to blag a hotel as well and get a proper night's sleep. And I remember getting to the train station the next morning. We're on our way to London, and we're doing Brixton Academy, also I thought. And we all sit on the train, and I'm having the time of my life. Do you know what I mean? And obviously it's the first one we've not had to sit and split a van. We're on the nice train to London, and everyone's very excited. And Josh, the manager, he takes me down to Carriage. He says, "Do you want to come and get a coffee?" So I go with him, and he takes me to one side and said, "Look, you've had your fun, but you're not playing this tonight. You're not doing this. This is a big gig for the band. You're not doing it." So I was like, okay, great, sure. And all of a sudden, Andrew, he's going, "Josh, what the fuck are you talking about? He's in the fucking band. Ronnie, you're in the fucking band, okay? You're in fucking Littl'ans." And again, it was like I was fucking, caught in the middle of this, and Josh saying all, this is stupid. This, it's going to look stupid. Like this is, it's a gimmick, blah, blah. And I was just like, look, guys, I'm happy. I'm 18 and I'm at university, and I'm not really. This has been brilliant, and it's broken all, it's basically Andy was just like, no, you're in the band and it works. And over time, we were a little bit like Spinal Tap. We went through a lot of bass players and a lot of drummers. And eventually, by the time that we kind of settled with our final kind of lineup, they'd seen what I've done on stage, and they could see the impact that I made in terms of the performance and, the resonation I had with the crowd, hopefully. I used to bash that tambourine. I mean, I used to have bruises all over me, like literally. I mean, I'd lose a tambourine every gig because I was 18 and I was just pissed every night. But I'd wake up with huge fucking bruises all over me, and it's just literally, I'd just lose myself on stage. And I think I was that kind of bridge between audience and band, in the sense that these kids, these kids just wanted to have a fucking great time, and they saw me having a great time, and literally like there wasn't anything else to do in the world, and they did the same. And for me, that was, that's something I would love. I mean, I would definitely not have the fitness levels to do that again, but I'd love to go back and do that, man, because that was, that was crazy. That was just, it's just a great time. And that was, definitely. I mean, we played Brixton Academy, and I remember people stage, so crowd surfing towards the stage, and I remember spotting people I knew. And that was a big moment for me, where I was just like, fucking hell, my mates are fucking in the crowd surfing. We're supporting Babyshambles at Brixton Academy. But the most amazing thing for me at Brixton Academy was the catering. We didn't really get catering on Babyshambles tours, as you can probably imagine. You don't really get, I mean, as a support band, you get 50 quid and you probably get, a pot of hummus and fucking a couple of croutons. But we actually got proper catering at Brixton Academy, hot meals. And then they had unlimited Haribo and as many soft drinks as you wanted. It's like I was just fucking intravenous in fucking Fanta and Tangfastics all day. It's like a far cry from maybe what was happening down the room in the other dressing rooms. It's like I was just getting like loaded on fucking sweets and fizzy drinks.
It's like that Bush Selector character of Pete Doherty on the Barbans.
Absolutely. Well, do you know what? I actually used to run a Bo Selector fan site.
Right.
I know Lee Francis, who is Bo Selector, Keith Lemon. Yeah. I remember it took me a good couple of years to come clean, and I was like at a festival with him, and I was like, Lee, do you remember boabbott.com? And he was like, yeah. I was like, it was me. He was like, I love that site. Thanks for doing that. I was like, God, I'm such a loser. That's the thing, is that the internet for me has always been such a relaxing thing for me to do, and I've always loved making silly websites with no, and obviously the forums, for me that was a big thing. I would be the ones on the forum posting about the gigs and telling people about what we're playing, and 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 obviously the others forum, and posting on there, and most of my friends to begin with. The reason I came to London is because of the 853, because I felt like I had a community that I was part of, and obviously then with Littl'ans, being in a band, they become your family. I think Preston was saying that, wasn't he? Sam was saying that it's like you become very dysfunctional when you stop being in a band, because you're just used to being around these people. You kind of miss all your formative years. I thought it was a really telling thing for him to share and to say, really. It's been, I mean, that's, for me, that obviously that time was crazy. And I don't think we're going to get another time in history like that again, really, where it just felt like anything could happen at a Babyshambles gig. Anything could happen. And it was so exciting. And things started, I mean, with Babyshambles, we supported them at Brixton Academy the year after as well. And we did a lot of gigs at Ribbon Factory with them. And there was one gig where Pete, I think, like, was swearing at Drew on stage and kicking off, and was like, a complete fucking mess. And we weren't allowed to go backstage until they'd finished to take our instruments home and take our bags and stuff. And I think that the gig went on for 4 hours, and I think we were all like, we never want to see them play again. And I think when it started to become a bit like the car crash slowing down and people slowing down to watch it, and there were people at the gigs there hoping something bad was going to happen. They weren't there for the music. I feel like that tour, the Down in Albion tour, was the last time that the crowd were genuinely there. Everyone in that room was there because of the music. I feel like the tabloid kind of side of it really took over and really tainted those shows for a good time. It took Pete to have that massive fall from grace, really, until again he had to kind of refresh and restart his fan base again, really.
So just going back to there, where does that fit into everything? Like, when you're on this tour, do the fans know the song at that point?
So what was funny is we were at Brixton Academy soundcheck, and Pete hadn't watched any of our soundchecks, and he comes out for soundcheck, and he's talking to Andrew, and he's going, "Hey, what's that one we wrote? How's it go?" So Andrew's having to teach him the chords on stage. All right. And there was these two girls called the Birmingham Girls, Natalie and Francesca, and they said they were on holiday with him many years later. And they were singing Their Way. And he went, "That's a great song. Who's that by?" And they went, "By you." So I don't know how much affinity and kind of how dear Pete holds Their Way to his chest. I think it went to number 41 or 42 or something in the charts, so we missed out on the top 40 single. I mean, when I say we, I mean I wasn't anything to do with it. I think in the indie chart it was number 1, but I think at that time anything that got released that week goes number 1. But we did get released the same week.
22 on Wikipedia, but I don't know if that's wrong.
That was I probably edited that drunk one night. A bit like I edited Dids Hammond's Wikipedia. He does know about this, and I said that he's got the largest collection of rental blockbuster videos in the UK, and it's still there. And if I'm ever feeling down and low, I literally just click on that and just sit and read it. And I swear I mean, maybe not now, but I swear that he has been asked about this in interviews as well for Dirty Pretty Reviews. It's just, I feel like with this Wikipedias, it's like if you put something in that's just so, it's not derogatory, it's almost like it's unprovable. Dids might actually have the world's biggest collection of ex-rental blockbuster videos, but at the same time, I'm pretty sure he doesn't. But when Their Way came out, it was the same week as the Arctic Monkeys. And I think they sold 22,000 copies in the first day. Right. And that was obviously the start of like the tornado of indie. And I liked what Mark Beaumont was saying, like there's almost this kind of like snobbery about the, calling it Landfill in indie. And I thought it was really interesting the fact that they had never really kind of given a good scene name. Like the New Rock Revolution was more Australian music, and it was a bit of a shit name, wasn't it? And Landfill Indie is so condescending. But yet, anybody I speak to who was around that time or is nostalgic or reminiscent of that time, they all it's, you know what I mean? It feels like house in days, especially, you know, in the current climate of COVID and, you know, just lockdown that we're kind of stuck in. It's, you know, even more people yearning for those kind of days back. And the Arctic Monkeys, obviously, you know, that week we had no chance in terms of who we were up against, but definitely that was the start of, you know, indie becoming, you know, I mean, look at them. The Arctic's just a phenomenal success story, aren't they?
But just with Their Way again, sorry, like, so you say him and Pete Doherty and Andrew co-wrote it. Like, who wrote the melody, do you know? Because I think that's one of Pete Doherty's best melodies, I think. It's really good.
So recently, Pete has been in contact with Andrew to try and get to buy the rights of him for the song, which shows that Andrew wrote it, because they want to use it in a French film.
All right.
And Pete had been going around telling everyone that he wrote it. So when it actually came to the actual publishing through Rough Trades, obviously Andrew is the songwriter on it. And it's obviously featuring Pete. I mean, Pete basically, I think Pete just sung one of the choruses, or one of the verses, or maybe they sung it together. I haven't actually listened to it in a long time, as much as it's a song very dear to my heart. I remember Chris Morris, the comedian, came to one of our gigs, and I'd snogged this girl the night before, and I didn't realise that she was friends with Chris Morris, and so she'd come to the gig to see us play and brought him. And like, I was so starstruck that I didn't even notice that she was there with him next to him. And I was like, you know, and I was literally chatting away, and he was saying, I'm making this film about terrorists, and I probably told him some stupid story about terrorism myself. And I said, I'm in Littl'ans. He said, yeah, I know. He said, yeah, Their Way, you know, yeah, with the brown, you know, the brown paper bag cover. And I said, yes. You know, it's like, fucking hell, he's got our singles. You know what I mean? Again, it was like, oh my God, Kill Me Now, perfect. Life Over, Chris Morris. Do you know what I mean? Like, my absolute comedy hero. Like, do you know what I mean? And it was that kind of craziness of I mean, the next day I got a MySpace message from the girl being like, thank you for fucking ignoring me after bringing Chris Morris to your gig. Because I must have been talking about him the night before. And in terms of the song, from what I've been told, I mean, Andrew, we actually had lunch just before lockdown, and he was telling me about how Rough Trade were basically trying to get him to give rights to this film, basically. And yeah, Andrew wrote it and Pete sung on it. And I think that's testament to Andrew's songwriting, really, is that he always said he never wanted to be a big pop star or success, but I just always loved his music, you know, and that was the biggest catalyst for me really wanting to stay in Littl'ans, was just I loved the songs. And every time I danced on stage with that tambourine, you know, and just danced my little cotton socks off, was because I loved the music, you know, and that was it, really.
Was it a one-off deal with Rough Trade for that single?
Yeah, I mean, it was obviously Pete was signed to Rough Trade with Libertines, and maybe Babyshambles with that down in Albion, was that on?
I think so, yeah.
You know, Rough Trade. It was you know, it was a star power of Pete. I've mentioned this manager Josh through the story, and I like, you know, Josh, if you're listening, man, I hope you're well. But we didn't really have. I mean, you know, I've got friends now, you know, in great bands, and you look at the machine around them, and you know, and maybe because modern day music is obviously a different world. Because again, I feel like this was like one of the last scenes before things got really money orientated, and like, you know, you can't do guerrilla gigs and things like that now, because it's, you know, too many moving parts. You know, you've got a exclusivity contract with one promoter, so you can't suddenly show up in that town and play a random gig without breaking contract and blah, 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 you know, and all this stuff. But I do feel like we didn't really have any real management in place after the Babyshambles tour and after Their Way. We didn't have any clue what was going on, really. And it was only really until we got in touch with Hedy Slimane, or vice versa, he got in touch with us, that really we had any real direction in what we were doing as a band. So Josh got sacked or left or whatever, so Josh went. And we...
relief for you, really, because he obviously didn't like the look of you, did he?
No, well, the thing is, Josh was the reason that I was in that position to begin with. Josh was my friend from Brighton through this Redcoats band.
So you're right, yeah.
So he'd kind of become a bit of a turncoat, really, and decided that, yeah, I mean, the jealousy in the band was because I was, you know, like I was saying, from that first gig, people was, you know, chanting my name and not others in the band, you know. And, you know, Alex, the guitarist, and I think at the beginning we weren't, you know, the best of friends, but we became very, very good friends. And we were like, you know, we would bunk bendy buses like nobody's ever bunked bendy buses before. Do you know what I mean? Like literally, we would just spend the whole day waking up in Camberwell, bunking the bendy bus to wherever, getting kicked off by, ticket inspectors, walking along, across the bridge into Soho, hanging out in shops, going to the PPQ shop and basically asking for a cup of tea, walking into Shoreditch, finding a gig to go to, and, ended up. I mean, the best thing about that time in London was the indie scene. There were just nights on every day of the week. So you're from Hull, so obviously you had the Yo-Yo at the Welly. Like in London, you had, so Monday was Trash, which was at the end, which is like where LCD Sound System and Daft Punk and some fucking amazing bands like Liars played. Then Tuesday you were either at Panic, which was at the Roxy, or which was £2, I think, £3 for 2 bottles of Heineken. Or like £8 for like these jugs that as soon as you drank them, you just didn't remember anything for the next 4 hours. It was like glass all over the floor. Or you went to White Heat, which was the kind of cooler version, but they had live music as well. So bands played before. So you had a lot of kind of big bands kind of played their first ever gigs at White Heat. And then Wednesday was Cheapskates, which was 80p a drink. I mean, like, fuck me, those days. Then Thursday was Smash and Grab, which was just the best club night I've ever been to. You'd have Kate Moss in the toilet giving girls advice on makeup. You'd have Nick Grimshaw doing karaoke with Agnes Dean. You'd have Supergrass dressed as Diamond Hoo-Ha Men playing live. You'd have Mark Ronson DJing. It was just like, this incredible place. And I used to get booked to DJ there, and it was like anything goes. It was like the best wedding you'd ever been to. And you got to Friday, which was at Coco, which was Club NME. And if you were on the guest list and you got a wristband, then it was like, oh my God, you're in the VIP box. And then if you got a red wristband, you were allowed to go backstage. And it was like, it wasn't anything backstage, like it wasn't any drink or anything, but it was just that status thing, to the point where they actually created a club night before Coco called Daddy, I Want a Wristband, right? Which was like, run by the organisers of Club ME, basically just to take the piss out of it. And then Saturday was Frog. Did you ever go down to Frog? Did you ever come down for that, where the pads played?
I saw him a couple of times down there. I might have done, yeah.
And that was just, again, it was amazing. And that was all the lads that lived above at Lambuka. So you had like Kid and you had Beans on Toast. You had like Dave from the Holloways. You had Tom Frog, who was just like, people were wearing T-shirts saying, I know Tom Frog. And it was like, again, it was, Frog was amazing. You had Young and Lost from upstairs. You had, bands like Vincent and the Villains and Les Inc. and all these people playing upstairs. And then downstairs, what was amazing is basically, they had a guy from the NME that was basically would put on the gigs with them, and it would just be a feeder as a promotional part of the tour for bands. So if you released an album that week, how kind of bands used to do like HMV, they do like all the kind of record stores that week. Then with the Frog, basically with Frog, the Saturday night was almost like that was the big London promotional gig. So you'd have like the Arctic Monkeys the first week they released their album, they performed Block Party, all these amazing bands. The Cribs. I mean, I remember seeing the Cribs and just being like, I think I lost my shoes. It was amazing, and all that kind of stuff. It was just fucking brilliant. And then you go, and then Sunday was Sensible Sundays at Lot Tavern, and literally, I mean, I don't know how I did it. I didn't have a job. I wasn't making any really money in the band. Every now and again, someone might give me like 50 quid, and I'd be like, "Thank you so much for that £50." Because you're 18, 19, just fucking happy just to be. Just living the dream, and I suppose you learn to blag, you learn. It's how I started DJing, was that I learned that if I DJed, I got paid and I got free drinks, and I didn't have to queue for anything. And so obviously the DJing stuff and the DJing story for me started when I was still at university halls, but I obviously was just about to kind of sack it all off and kind of quit university full time. And I got a text from someone, and it was like, "Hi, it's Mairead from Queens of Noise. I hear you're a DJ. Do you want to play the Queens of Noise night this Friday?" And I was like, shut up. This is a joke. Again, oh, shut up. This is a joke, whatever. So kind of text back, yes, please. And I remember even like the moment of getting to 333, I still thought it was a prank. I thought someone was having me on, and I got there and Mairead was like, "Hi," and I had never DJ'd. I didn't know what I was doing. All I knew is that I liked music and I had a good music taste, in my opinion. And there was a DJ called Goldie Rocks, who Sam's still a good friend. And Goldie Rocks was like, okay, look, I'll take you under my wing. I'll show you what to do. And I mean, DJing CD indie music is, you know what I mean? My fucking dog could do it, you know. You know, because it is literally, I mean, the trick is just to make sure you play one song after the other. That's it. And, you know, like, you know, and there's no more technicality to it. You can't really DJ guitar music, right? You just can't, you know, it's like, I'm sure there is people who argue otherwise, but generally, you know, you just got to make sure that one song blends into the next one, like kind of seconds, you know, towards the end. So that was the start of DJing, and that became a kind of side career for a few years. But what was great, obviously, is that we would play gigs, and then I would be booked to DJ the after parties and things like that. And Adam used to do that with Babyshambles, and Gary still does it with the Libertines, and it's a good, you know, it's not just a good way to make a bit extra cash, but, you know, it's a nice way as well just to kind of bookmark your, you know, your relevance in the party, you know, in terms of why you're there, and obviously being so well known for being that person that danced on stage, you know, like the Indie Bears, was obviously, you know, to be able to then DJ and to kind of help create, you know, a dance floor was obviously almost kind of went hand in hand.
How long were you in the band? I mean, I saw they released an album in 2008. Is that right?
Yes. I mean, so basically we went to, so just to give, if anyone hasn't, it's not, I presume most people have probably turned off by now, but what happened was we ended up kind of becoming a fashion band. So we ended up we played the 100 Club, and our drummer quit mid-tour. Like it was like Spinal Tap, he like blew up mid-set. And Adam Firecheck from Babyshambles, obviously used to be in a band with Andrew, and he came on tour with us. And Adam, I mean, I texted Adam this morning, actually. We're still really close mates. And basically he came on tour, and we played the 100 Club, and, you know, that was obviously, you know, a prestigious venue for us to play, you know, the home of punk. And I remember there was just one bloke that just was photographing me for the whole gig, and I was wearing, I mean, I've got some pictures actually that, of this outfit, and I'm wearing girls' jeans that are like size 8. I've got a safety pin that's attached to like a girl's top that like is basically allowing me no modesty. I've got huge curly long hair. I'm wearing basically like a million girls' beads around my neck. It's like you couldn't be any more androgynous if you tried. And I remember dancing my socks off. I remember we had this one song, Don't Call It Love, it was called. And it had a false start, basically, where the drums didn't come in until a bit later. And I remember being like, by this point, I was like, I really want to bring Adam in. I'm going to bring Adam in. And I brought Adam in at the wrong time. I brought him in too early. Anyway, but it was a great gig. And I just remember this guy snapping me. And Anne McCloy, who basically, she designed all the merch for Selfish Cunt and Babyshambles and Littl'ans, she was there, and she said, oh, Hedy Slimane liked you. And I went, who's that? And she went, Hedy Slimane, you don't know who Hedy Slimane is? And I went, no, who the fuck is that, right? And obviously I did think it was weird that he was only photographing me and nobody else in the band. But I just thought, you know, by that point, you've almost got a little bit of ego, and you just go, oh, right, okay, that makes sense. And I remember I smashed the beads against the speaker stack at the end of the gig, and all the beads exploded everywhere across the crowd. And I remember this one girl came up to me, and she was like pulling them out of her bra, going, fucking hell, no, you know. And it was like, you know, you felt like a rock star for that short moment. And a few days later, we get an email to the band account, and it's from Hedy's assistant, Christopher, and it's, hi, Hedy would like to meet Ronnie for lunch. And Christopher, I remember Andrew turning around and saying, do you know who this is? And we go, no. And he showed me this Birth of a Rock and Roll book that he did, where he basically photographed like Pete and the Cazals and all these kind of bands of that era, Paddingtons, I think, you know, because obviously all the Giorgino Testino stuff that obviously Paddingtons did, you know. And there was obviously a synergy with rock and roll and fashion already. And then, basically I was dating this girl, and she was a massive Hedy Slimane fan. So I was like, well, come with me to the lunch, right? So we went for this lunch, and she just kind of sat there like, oh my God, it's Hedy Slimane, right? And he was just this really unassuming, wide-eyed kind of French guy, very shy, spoke very slowly, very, very French. And maybe one of the reasons that we connected is because I didn't have that kind of nervous energy of like, wow, this is a fashion legend that I'm sat with. You know, this is just, you know, a weird French bloke who likes to make clothes. And he said, I want to make a film about you. I want to basically, he said that there was this street performer in the 1900s that he had been researching and known about. And he basically used to just perform this entire set on one wooden block. And he obviously seen my dancing and what have you. And so he basically got me to transpose my entire set stood on a wooden block. And all you can hear is the tambourine rattling and my winkle picker heels hitting the wooden block. And you can't hear the music of the Littl'ans. That's all kind of hidden in headphones. And that was debuted at the Grand Palais in Paris. And that was again a surreal thing because we got to the hotel and I stupidly wrote Littl'ans on the wall in permanent marker. I don't know why I did it because it's not the type of thing that I was ever a rebel without a cause. And I remember like Hetty's people saying, we're not going to tell him, but please don't fucking do that again. And then the next thing I know, Hetty's having lunch with me and Andrew and he's like, well, look, can you do the soundtrack for our next fashion show? And the Rakes had just done the obviously you love the Rakes, mate, don't you? And yeah, they basically had the Rakes had just done it. I think Pete had done it. You know, like all these these new Puritans did it a year after us, and which was a great. I mean, they were like 10-minute long, opuses. They were wicked. And we did a song called "Don't We Look Good Together." And there was a little bit of tambourine on it, very little bit of tambourine on it. Basically we spent a summer recording it and hanging out with Hedy, generally on Hampstead Heath. I remember once the ice cream man came and Hedy was like, what is a 99? And we had to explain to the king of fucking men's fashion what a 99 ice cream was. And the next thing I know is he's like, I want you to be in the show. And I'm like, what? Again, it's like another what moment. And basically we I go over to Paris and I meet up with a load of French builders and they have a harness and a motorized arm, basically that's 12 foot or maybe even higher up from the floor. And I've got these diamond encrusted angel wings that they put on me. And then they load me into the harness and they load me up onto this motorized arm and they're flying me back and forth from the catwalk, back and forth. And they can't speak any English and I can't speak any French. And I feel like I'm Michael Craw and fucking Michael Spencer, as some others do have them. And I'm just like, what the fuck am I doing here? I just remember being left to dangle as they would just be kind of fixing things on the motor and blah, blah, blah. And just thinking, this is mental, mate, right? And then Hedy would arrive and he'd kind of go, and by the time you just feel like, just get me out of here, right? And eventually he said, no, it does not work, right? Because he's now African, right? And he's like, it does not work. And then he says, no, but I'm just going to do it in a normal accent. Now you will walk. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to walk. What? And he's like, yeah, you're going to be in the show. And I'm like, what? And he's like, but you're not a model, you are my tambourine angel. So I'm like, okay, I'm your tambourine angel. And he's like, yeah, I want you to wear these diamond encrusted wings and I want you to come out for the finale of my last ever Dior show and I want you to wear wear these wings and play the tambourine and lead all the models out for the finale, right? Which is just fucking mind-blowing. I mean, supposedly Karl Lagerfeld cried because I was so beautiful, right? It's what someone told me. But we had Mick Jagger in the front row sat next to Andrew, and the only person I saw when I did this show was Andrew just kind of going, come on, right? And he was sat next to Mick, right? And then you've got Elton John. I remember being backstage, right, after the show, and obviously quickly taking off a fucking diamond rings, right? And those wings went straight. I wasn't allowed to have them on my persons for any longer than the show. They must have been real diamonds because I was eyeing up. I wanted to try and sneak it back in my suitcase, right? And then basically there was this big bloke in front of me, and I was trying to get back into the change room, and it was Elton John. It was like me tapping Elton John on the shoulder, going, "Sorry, mate, can I just get past there?" Right? And then we went and played this gig for Hedy's birthday that night, and Mick Jagger was there, And I was DJing, so I was up in the decks, and supposedly Andrew chatted to Jagger and said, like, "Do you think you want to play a song with us tonight?" And he's like, "Yeah, we'll do Night of Nervous Breakdown." And then I remember being on stage and Andrew being like, "Yeah, Mick Jagger's here, isn't he? Is he going to get up on stage?" And he'd obviously left by that point. Right. But anyway, so the reason that obviously your story was about how long was in Littl'ans for, and obviously I needed to give all that backstory to kind of explain that we then, because of the fashion industry adopted us, that kind of I think ruined any of our chances of the music industry, because if you kind of go that route, the music industry doesn't really kind of have any time for you. They kind of feel like you've sold out a bit, and you kind of lose all your integrity kind of as musicians, because it looks like you're kind of sucking corporate cock. And so it's more that we were making really quick, easy money, doing fashion show. The money's amazing for fashion stuff. And then obviously, because I was then a Dior model, in inverted commas, obviously I was getting more modelling stuff, and I modelled for like K-Swiss and Dr. Martens and Levi's and all this kind of random stuff. And so that was obviously, that was turned in my head one direction. Obviously the DJing obviously I started DJing at festivals, so DJing at Reading Festival and V Festival and places like that. So that was all kind of building my in my head, that was building my profile. And then we moved to New York. Basically, we did this one show for Gap at the National Portrait Gallery. And that was, again, Brian Ferry was there and Goldfrapp was there. And it was, it was a great show. And we basically gave us enough money for us all to move to New York. And we'd managed to get a couple of gigs with this DJ trio called the Misshapes, who were like the coolest fucking... just the coolest kids in town, right? Basically, like Madonna asked if she could DJ for them once, and they were like the ultimate New York hipsters. And we went to stay with them I was staying with them, and Andrew stayed somewhere else, and the rest of the band. We were basically all in sofa surfing, but we had a gig with the Horrors at Misshapes, and then we were going to play, I think, Slash's Club. It was all like kind of, anyway, I only got to do one gig, and we played the gig at Misshapes, and that was amazing. It was like one of my most favourite gigs. And the Horrors were so good then, because that was the first album. What was the first album called now?
Hannah Counting Fives was a single, yeah.
Yeah, so it was like, Sheila Was a Parasite. And basically Faris would basically just have all this black paint, and he just put them all over his hands, and he'd just go into the crowd and just like handprint people's faces, and like you'd leave a Horrors gig and people would just be covered in black paint, and the strobes were so violent and vicious, and just like the whole thing was just like a wall of sound. It was amazing, right? And they were a phenomenal performance. And then we saw them play again, and this was at Halloween, and there was a big piñata, and I remember Faris like using the mic to smash it, and some American guy said something to him, and he jumped off the stage, and they got a fist fight, and it was a fucking massive brawl broke out, and then we DJ'd afterwards. But I'd been late for that gig because I'd woken up basically the night before with these cold sweats, right? Like I basically was like having to tell someone to close the window, open the window, close the window, like really, really feverish. Had finally got to this venue. It was like for Steve Aoki, I think it was, that we DJ'd. And then we left, and for the next week, I was just basically sofa bound in the Misshapes flat, like sofa bound, and I couldn't move. Like I couldn't even taste anything. I remember they bought me a pizza, and like I'm a fucking junk food fiend, and they were like, I couldn't taste it. It was horrendous. And my bandmate Ben, he was like, right, I think I'm gonna have to take you to hospital, Ron, tomorrow, because I'm not sure you're well. And especially being like 19 and being like a ball of energy to suddenly being reduced and not even be able to taste food. But I thought, well, I'm in New York, like, this is like a once in a lifetime opportunity to be living in New York, and Englishmen in New York. There was a party somewhere, so I basically dragged myself out of bed, and I remember going to like the 7-Eleven and getting a bottle of Coke and a donut, and I couldn't taste either. I remember losing. Maybe it was COVID. Maybe I had the first ever loss of taste. And I remember getting to the party and just knew I'd made the wrong decision. And I said, right, I've got to go. So I walked back to the apartment, and the Horrors were actually over with the Misshapes. Or the Misshapes weren't there, but they were in the flat, and they didn't know how to let me in, or just didn't want to let me in. Either way, I couldn't get into the flat, and I actually think this saved my life, because I then went back to someone else's flat called Gail's flat, and a couple of my bandmates were over there too, and I fell asleep, and I woke up about 4 p.m. the next day, and I woke up, and they were like, "Oh, Ronnie, you're awake!" And then all of a sudden, I had a seizure, and I suppose 4 New York firemen had to hold me down, and I was sedated, and I was rushed into hospital, rushed into St Vincent's Hospital in Chelsea, and I was basically I went into a coma.
Right.
And I had meningitis, and I was in a coma for a month, and I basically kind of told my mum and my sister and my girlfriend at the time that they were coming to kind of collect me in a box kind of thing, and I was obviously very lucky to get through that, and they kind of obviously from that, obviously I got flown home, and it was like 6 months of kind of back at my mum's, basically being nursing myself back to health. And during that time, Littl'ans went on to record an album, and obviously I didn't have anything to do with it, and played a few more gigs after that, but that was kind of the end of the kind of Littl'ans dream, really. It was obviously by that point, I'd kind of started to kind of fancy doing things on my own. I'd started fancying being myself a bit of a singer. I referenced Selfish Cunt at the beginning. It's like I kind of wanted to try that person next and try and see if I could be him. And I just think anyone could ever be Martin Tomlinson. I just think he's like just the most abrasive, wonderfully abrasive, selfish cunt there is, basically. And so I started a band called No Picasso, and obviously the DJ, and even like to this day I'm still lucky enough to get bits to DJ at things. And it was mad. I remember one of the weirdest things in New York actually was on the first night we were having dinner with the Misshapes. And they were so American, and they were like, "We have these tickets, and it's a bit boring. We don't really want to go." And we're like, "Oh, right, what? Who's playing?" They're like, "The Strokes and Kanye West." And we were like, "What?" "Yeah, we don't want to. Do you want them?" And we're like, yes. Oh my God. And I remember we went, it was this Hennessy party. It was all free Hennessy, which is actually not a great thing to be drinking all night. We saw the fucking Strokes and Kanye in our first night in New York. And it was like, this is it. Do you know what I mean? Like, and it's like, as much as, there was obviously that horror of meningitis, everything, that kind of the stories that I look back on, it's just, I'm just very lucky and very privileged that I got to have that chance. And to kind of fall into this opportunity that really I hadn't earned and had no fucking right to be there.
So what was that, like kind of an invite on the gig or something?
Yeah, it was at Radio City, so like music hall. So it must have been like some big launch, because I remember Ewan McGregor was there. In fact, another funny story from that was I remember we were on the red carpet, because obviously we were there with the Misshapes. They had this PR guy, and he was in Borat, and he was punked by Sacha Baron Cohen in the film. Because I remember watching it a few years later and going, "Oh my God, that's the PR guy!" Right, so he was obviously like big enough for Sacha to be making a fool of him. And I remember him, like, we went on the red carpet, and it was like all the flashing lights. It was like the hottest new band in town, the Littl'ans, and the photographers going, "Who?" Right, but obviously, like Paps just Pap, and they just fucking photograph everyone. And all of a sudden, I could just hear this PR girl whisper to someone else and go, "Can we get these nobodies off here? Kirsten Dunst is here." And with like Ewan McGregor like in front of us in the middle, like fucking rabbits in the headlights, and then Kirsten Dunst waiting for us nobodies to walk off. Right, but I mean, that's the thing. I feel like when you go to places like New York, you've got one chance to fake it or make it, haven't you? Really?
No, it sounds like you had a good one.
We did
the most of it anyway.
I mean, I was very lucky. I mean, the first ever NME Awards I ever went to, I didn't have a ticket. But I remember hearing about it, and I remember knowing that lots of people that I'd obviously met were going, and I mean, it's the blagger in me, but I just thought, right, how am I going to get in here? How am I going to get into the NME Awards? And obviously, Andrew had lived with Jarvis for about 10 years in the 90s. So I'm kind of working out. I mean, I think I'd gone up to the guest list at the beginning and just said, "Hi, I'm Ronnie from Littl'ans," and then like double checking the list and going, "Oh, we're really sorry you're not on the list." I mean, trying to do like the kind of the confident kind of blag, and that didn't work. So I was like, "Fuck, right." But I wasn't going to give up. I remember my girlfriend was in there, and I think that was the thing. Like I was like being really entitled, and I was like, "Well, she can't be going, and I can't. I'm the rock star here, right?" And I remember Jarvis arrived, and I got Jarvis to blag me in and say that I was with him. And he blagged me into the NME Awards. Right? And I remember getting in there and being like, and again, it's like, all these bands that I suddenly knew, and The View supported Littl'ans in Glasgow. I remember Alan McGee was there, and it was like, And it was they supported us, and they obviously went on to become very successful. And we, as very much as it's lovely to be invited on this, in terms of the other people, the other bands, we're very much bottom. We're the litter of the run in terms of our success. But obviously the View and Kyle and I mean, hopefully he's called me now. We got into a fight. We got into a fucking fist fight at the NME Awards. Well, I'm pretty sure it was like me versus the whole band. It was like a load of fucking scallies from fucking Dundee and me. And it was this huge fucking rock. And it was like, I don't know how it happened. I don't know what I said or what I did. But it was like fucking glasses in the air. It was like, proper. I got a good old arse kicking off the View. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing is like that being, I mean, I'm very lucky that I didn't really I was always kind of on good terms with bands. Like obviously I hung out at the Hawley Arms. So like, you had, the Amy Winehouse, like I hung out with Amy a lot and I was very, very lucky in that sense. And our bass player Ryan's uncle was Johnny Family, who was obviously the drug dealer that went to prison for selling the video of her, and so there was obviously that connection, and his best mate was Blake, and all pretty scumbag stories, but obviously at the time you don't really consider that. And obviously Nambuka, with obviously all the lads there, and yeah, I mean it was London was such a great stomping ground in those days, really, I think, for everyone. I remember going to a party at I think this is the epitome of the London indie scene for how I saw it. I was chatting to Donny from the Towers of London. I bumped into him in Portsmouth last year, and I was saying, how mad is it, man, that we met at a party at 2:00 in the afternoon on a Saturday? We hadn't been to bed, and we arrived at a new house party that was still going for the night before because our last one had died off. And you were there, and I was there at 2:00 in the afternoon. And that's the first time we met. And I remember being up in Hull the first time that we played Hull, and I remember meeting, I think it was the first time I ever met the Paddingtons. And I remember, again, it was like, you didn't live for tomorrow, you just lived for the moment and for the now. And I think maybe that's what kids these days are doing, but just in a different way. Maybe it's just we only see it through our kind of, we can only see as far as a past. Oh God, am I having a stroke? Can only see past the end of my nose in terms of what young people are doing now. But it does feel like that generation and the excitement and the enthusiasm and the passion was unrivaled.
Yeah, I remember you playing that gig in Hull, I think, because there's plenty of rumours that Pete was going to turn up. Was that like a headline tour you were doing?
It was. It was out. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, the Pete thing really did follow us around like a bad smell towards the end, because obviously kind of Pete's fall from grace and the negativity about him, and obviously the bad press, and and the press were really out to vilify him, and maybe he deserved it. Who knows? And he, that kind of that our association so instantly, especially in Europe. We were very lucky to play some great shows in Europe, but everyone was there because of Pete. And then obviously the Dior thing completely changed our fan base to something being very fashionista, which was very kind of vacuous and very, like we were flavour of the month, and once there was a new, basically once these new Puritans released that song, I wasn't hanging out with Eddie, they were, and it's like, kind of, a little bit like it's like being back at school. Do you know what I mean? It's like you're not in the core group anymore. And you would play gigs in Europe and kids would just go, how is Pete? And I actually remember Adam Feijet used to fucking give my number out when kids used to ask him for Pete's number. So I used to get fucking phone calls all the fucking time, right? So one day I thought, right, I'm going to get Adam back, because I thought, right, this can't be going on, because it was fucking doing my head in. So I set up a Gumtree advert for this flat in Camden, and it was like all mod cons, like swimming pool, indoor gym, Sky TV, electricity and gas, all included, £500 a month, private, for like during like literally the most amazing offer for Camden. And I set one up I think as well for Scotland, because I wanted some really gruff. I think I set up a personals advert in Scotland for like a buxom blonde that like basically that was like in Dundee or like Dumfries or somewhere, and he just got this barrage of fucking phone calls from people either asking to rent his flat or to fucking go on a date with him. And that was I think he had to change his number after that. But it serves you right, Feijet.
Just got I don't know if it's about the NME Awards, but one of your notes saying Kate Moss tells you to fuck off. Was that the NME Awards?
Yeah, so that was... So after I'd come back from New York, and obviously after... So I've been to many, many NME Awards, you know, like I've got... I think I'm a good omen, because every single time I've been to NME Awards, as in like properly without blacking it with Jarvis, I've actually, whatever table I've been on, that band has always won an NME Award. So either I'm hanging out with or maybe I'm the good luck charm, who knows. But I remember getting back from New York, and obviously once kind of obviously getting a bit better and going to my first NME Awards after the meningitis scare. And Pete was there, and I remember he kind of came up and said, "Oh, hey, you had meningitis, are you okay?" Blah, blah, blah. And he was being, you know, he could be very charming. And then the next thing I know, Kate Moss comes over and she's rat-assed, right? And she literally goes, "Oi, stop talking to my boyfriend." And I'm like, "Hey, I'm sorry." And I was like, you know, "I'm from Croydon as well." And she went, "I don't care." And because obviously, like, that's where she grew up. And then Pete's like, "No, this is Ronnie." And she goes, "Just fuck off." Right? And that was the second time that she told me to fuck off, because the first time was me DJing at this party for this hairdresser, James Brown. And she was on the dance floor with Jason Donovan, right? It was a bit of a gruesome twosome that night, to be honest. And she was on the dance floor with him, and I played UB40's Red Red Wine, because that's the kind of cool DJ I am. And she was left dancing her own, and I thought she was clocking me, right? I thought that she'd given me the eye. So I kind of like saunter out past the decks, and I'm like, "Red, red." And I take her hands, and she just looks up at me and goes, "Fuck off." And that's it. And again, just get back into your box. And I slunk back on behind the decks, crestfallen. Yeah. You know, hey man, I've never seen someone that can, you know, like how you see bees swarm in cartoons. That's what she's like when you see her in a room. It's like only her and Paris Hilton are the two people that I've ever seen where literally, no matter who you are, no matter how famous or important you are watching every stride she makes. You know, she is just incredible, her star power.
Just got to know, this is a funny story. You got a funny story about Tarantino?
Yeah, so this is probably like my best. I've got two great stories, but I'm only going to share one tonight. And this is like the epitome, basically, of my time in London and my time at the indie scene. And I really hope that if there's listeners, don't think this is just like an excuse to name drop. But there's a lot of famous people involved in this story, and it's basically I'd broken up with this girl, and I was you know, really, really heartbroken walking through Camden, and Dougie, who owned the Hawley Arms. I mean, this has got all the kind of London indie scene like checkpoints. You know what I mean? It's like if you're playing like London indie scene bingo, you'd literally have full house listening to this story. So you've got Dougie from the Hawley Arms, check, right? And he bumps into me, and I think I'm holding like a Chinese takeaway, crying into my rice, right? And he's like, "You're right," and I'm like, "No, I've broken up with what's face, right?" And so we go to see Lord Large, right, who turned out to be the keyboard player in Squeeze and turned out to be in Pete Doherty's band as well for a bit. And he plays his gig at the Jazz Cafe, and it's brilliant. It takes my mind off things. And then afterwards, we got to the Hawley, and then Dougie used to live above it, and it was a bit of a party flat. And we were basically up there already. It was Johnny Burrell, Willie Burrell, his brother, Noel Fielding, and what's her name? Kimberly Stewart. Rod Stewart's daughter, right? So, you know, it's a showbiz affair, and we basically, I remember I swapped clothes with Kimberly Stewart, right? Again, random fucking, you know, crazy times. Anyway, and then we decided we were going to go to the Groucho Club, which is this members club in London, and we jump in a cab, and there's two different cabs, right? So I think Johnny and Noel and Willie went in one, and then, you know, me, Kimberly and Dougie in the other one, and then they go a bit further, a bit faster than us. So by the time we get to the Groucho, Noel Fielding is sat with Quentin Tarantino, and it turns out he's a massive Mighty Boosh fan, like huge Mighty Boosh fan, right? And I'm like nursing wounds, so I'm like a bit rabid and foaming at the mouth kind of vibe. Do you know what I mean? I'm not a pretty picture, and everyone's, you know, enthralled by Tarantino. And do you remember Theme Hospital?
Yeah.
Do you remember Mr. Bloaty Head? That's like Tarantino's got like American, like shut up football head, kind of fucking Hey Arnold size head. It's massive, right? And he's talking, and like I've tried to interject and say, like, what's this new film about? And he went, just watch it. And he was like, kind of like, shut up, moving on, right? And when I was a kid, I wrote a script. I must have been about 10 years old, and I wrote a script for Rocky 6. And it was 6 pages long, written on A6 paper, all the sixes, 666, right? And I remember having this dream that if I ever bumped into Sylvester Stallone, I would give him this script and we would make it and it would be the best film of all time, right? So I thought that was a really funny story to tell Tarantino, right? And again, just did not give a fuck. Do you know what I mean? Like literally just shut me down. I'm going to shut your ass down, right? So I'm feeling a bit rubbed up here. Do you know what I mean, right? And, you got that kind of Del Boy, like, he dares wins, Rodders, right? And being a bit of a cunt, to be honest, right? And I've said my one C word for the podcast. Right? And anyway, so we get to the end of the night, right? And we're all kind of queuing up to kind of say goodbye to Tarantino. And obviously at the beginning, I told you that my dream was to be a scriptwriter, right? Yeah. And we're all queuing up and it gets to me, right? And I turn around and say, hey, Quentin, do you think you might read one of my scripts if I emailed it to you? And he went, no. And I literally just went, well, do you want to read one of these? And literally just grabbed him in his midriff and went, eek, right? He then swung at me. I ducked. He fucking missed. Willie Burrell pulls me back off him, basically. And everyone's like, Ronnie, you've got to fucking go, mate. Right? Basically, Tarantino tried to punch me in the fucking face.
So what happened? You grabbed him in his chest?
I basically did like a little eek, like a honk. Basically, like Jim Carrey, like honk, right on him, like in his midriff. Basically, grabbed his belly and just went honk, right. And then like, do you want to read what? Yeah, almost like a fucking Warner Brothers cartoon, like. And it's just like, what am I doing? But obviously, I never saw him again or met him again, and it's a funny story for me to share. But it's just the epitome of that London indie scene. It's like you would know. I mean, Noel Fielding. I remember. I met Noel probably through Johnny Rhythm, and Johnny Rhythm was really influential in getting the Libertines back together for the first time. And when he died, very, very sad, very, very rapid cancer killed him. And Johnny used to put on the gigs at the Rhythm Factory and basically helped form that early Libertine scene, and was really good friends with Noel's and his brother. Basically they got back together for the first time and played live. It was actually on my birthday. They played at the Rhythm Factory as a tribute to Johnny, and that was the first time that Pete and Carl and Gary and I think Drew played instead of John that night. And obviously now they're back at rock and rolling, aren't they? And fingers crossed for the indie revival, so we can all go and live these days again, but maybe just from a bit of a safer distance. I mean, that's the thing that really, in terms of like Humble Pie, we were a speck in the indie scene. But I just think maybe that I was just very lucky to be a bit of a face in those days. Yeah,
it's really cool, like the way you went from, like fan to being supporting Babyshambles in a space of overnight, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the thing. My girlfriend always said almost the kind of the blunder years were kind of the years after that, kind of after No Picasso, kind of just running nightclubs and doing basically promoting and DJing. And just before I kind of started hanging out with Calvin Harris, and that's like a completely different chapter, really. Kind of these blunder years, she said everything kind of happened so young without having to really work very hard for it, that I kind of just didn't really know what to do with myself. Because I think, as Preston said, like you have these formative years that you miss. So where everyone's kind of learning and kind of finding self-discovery from being at uni and doing all that kind of, you're just basically just thrown into absolute chaos. And then you've got like 10 years basically to try and work out after those 10 years just kind of who you are and where you are. And I feel like even now at 33, I'm just about working it out. Until the time I get to see you again.
Know you now, see me free. I will know I knew you then, and to see you now and look beyond. You know they like to knock me down, but I don't stay down for very long.